What does it really mean to be born into a life of destiny? For Prince Charles, the oldest son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, it has meant a lifetime under the public eye, a delicate balance of personal desires and royal duty, and a seemingly endless wait to fulfill his ultimate role as king. From his earliest days as a shy boy growing up in Buckingham Palace to his evolution into a passionate advocate for sustainability and modernization, Charles's journey has been anything but ordinary. But how did his unconventional upbringing shape the man we see today? What role did his personal struggles play in redefining the monarchy for the modern era? And most importantly, as he stands on the brink of kingship, what kind of legacy will Charles leave behind? Let's get into details. On a chilly November morning in 1948, the bells of Buckingham Palace rang in celebration. A future king was born. Prince Charles Philip Arthur George entered the world as the firstborn child of then Princess Elizabeth and Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His birth marked not just the arrival of a royal heir, but a new chapter for the monarchy, which was preparing to adapt to a rapidly modernizing world. For Charles, however, those lofty expectations wouldn't become apparent for some time. His first years were defined by the relative innocence of royal nursery life, punctuated by public fascination and early glimpses of the spotlight. Growing up within the grandeur of Buckingham Palace and Clarence House, Charles's childhood was anything but typical. Yet, the little boy with a shy smile and curious eyes lived in a paradox of royal privilege and emotional distance. His parents, though devoted in their own way, were often preoccupied with the demands of royal duty. Queen Elizabeth ascended to the throne in 1952 when Charles was just 3 years old, thrusting her into a role that demanded her full attention. Prince Philip, meanwhile, brought a more hands-on, albeit strict approach to parenting, molding Charles in the image of a disciplined, resolute leader. But discipline came at a cost. Charles grew up under the watchful eyes of nannies and tutors, his days meticulously scheduled with little room for spontaneity. His father, a military man through and through, held Charles to high expectations, often pushing him to toughen up. Reports suggest that Philip's authoritative style clashed with Charles's sensitive nature, creating a relationship tinged with both admiration and strain. For a boy destined to lead, the weight of expectation was palpable even in his earliest years. As Charles transitioned from the palace nurseries to the classrooms of Hill House in West London, he became the first British heir to be sent to a school outside the palace walls. It was a groundbreaking decision made by his parents, reflecting their desire for Charles to experience the world beyond royal gates. Hill House's headmaster famously advised the Queen to let Charles play with other children, a sentiment that, while progressive, was short-lived. His time there was brief, and soon he was packed off to Cheam, a traditional preparatory school, before being sent to Gordonstoun in Scotland, a school that would become infamous for its rigorous environment. For Charles, Gordonstoun was a mixed experience. Founded on principles of resilience and self-reliance, the school embodied everything Prince Philip admired. Yet for Charles, the Spartan-like conditions and relentless physical challenges were a far cry from the warmth he craved. He described his time there as "Colditz in kilts," a nod to the notorious World War II prisoner of war camp. While the experience toughened him up, it also exacerbated his sense of isolation, as letters to his family often revealed his unhappiness. Despite this, the school instilled in him a sense of discipline and responsibility that would serve him well in later years. It wasn't all hardship, though. In 1966, Charles spent a term at Geelong Grammar School in Australia, a move that offered him not only a change of scenery, but also a break from Gordonstoun's rigors. His time in Australia was transformative, broadening his perspective and allowing him to connect with people in a way that felt freer and more natural. Away from the constraints of royal protocol, Charles reportedly thrived, forming friendships and gaining confidence in his ability to relate to others. This broader education, both geographically and intellectually, laid the foundation for a young prince who was beginning to carve out his identity. By the time he returned to England and completed his studies, Charles had already begun to display a curiosity about the world, a trait that would define much of his life. Yet, his academic journey was far from over. As he prepared to attend university, Charles once again broke royal precedent, becoming the first heir to the throne to pursue a degree. In 1967, Charles enrolled at Trinity College, Cambridge, where he studied archaeology, anthropology, and history. The choice to attend university was both symbolic and practical. On the one hand, it signaled a modernization of the monarchy, aligning it more closely with the educational aspirations of the public. On the other hand, it gave Charles a chance to explore his intellectual interests, even if he wasn't the most outstanding student. His years at Cambridge weren't without their challenges, but they were pivotal in shaping his worldview and introducing him to new ideas that would later inform his approach to environmentalism, architecture, and public service. By the time Charles graduated in 1970, the shy boy who had once struggled to fit into his surroundings was evolving into a young man with a growing sense of purpose. His investiture as the Prince of Wales the following year was a turning point, marking his formal induction into the duties and responsibilities of royal life. But behind the pomp and pageantry, Charles remained a complex figure, torn between the traditions of his heritage and the changing world around him. As the curtains closed on his formative years, Charles stood at a crossroads. The pressures of public expectation loomed larger than ever, and his next steps would set the tone for his journey as the future king. What lay ahead was a life filled with both extraordinary privilege and profound challenges, a life that would test his resilience, shape his legacy, and define his role in the modern monarchy. By the late 1960s, Prince Charles was no longer just a boy grappling with the challenges of boarding school. He was stepping into the public eye with increasing frequency. His investiture as the Prince of Wales in 1969 marked a significant turning point, both ceremonially and symbolically. Held at the majestic Caernarfon Castle in Wales, the event was orchestrated to showcase Charles's readiness to take on royal responsibilities. The televised ceremony, watched by millions across the globe, featured Charles delivering a speech in fluent Welsh, a skill he had honed during a term at the University College of Wales in Aberystwyth. This moment cemented his position as a figurehead for the monarchy's evolving relationship with its people. But behind the pomp and circumstance, the pressures of his role were mounting. As the first royal to earn a degree, Charles was breaking new ground. His time at Cambridge, though academically successful, wasn't without its challenges. The weight of expectation loomed over his every move. Charles, by nature introspective and sensitive, often found himself walking a tightrope between the traditions of the monarchy and the rapidly changing societal norms of the late 20th century. It was during these formative years as a young man that Charles began exploring his identity beyond the confines of Buckingham Palace. The 1970s were a decade of discovery for him, marked by significant milestones, both professional and personal. Fresh out of university, he embarked on a naval career, following in the footsteps of his father, Prince Philip. His journey into the armed forces wasn't merely a royal formality, it was a deep dive into a world of discipline, camaraderie, and service. In 1971, Charles enrolled at the Royal Air Force College at Cranwell, where he trained as a jet pilot. His commitment and skills earned him respect among his peers. By the end of the year, he began training with the Royal Navy, a decision that echoed his family's deep ties to naval service. Over the next few years, he served aboard the HMS Norfolk and trained as a helicopter pilot with the 845 Naval Air Squadron. His military service not only equipped him with practical skills, but also provided him with a sense of normalcy, a chance to live and work alongside others without the constant scrutiny of the public eye. Yet even as Charles excelled in his military duties, the expectations of his royal role never truly left him. His public engagements during this period revealed a young prince eager to connect with people, yet often constrained by the formality of his position. There were moments of genuine warmth. His speeches and interactions during royal tours often struck a chord, but there were also instances where his reserved demeanor was misconstrued as aloofness. These dualities would come to define much of his public image in the years to come. Amid his professional achievements, the 1970s also marked the beginning of Charles's complex and much scrutinized personal life. By the time he turned 30, his bachelor status had become a topic of national conversation. As the future king, his choice of a wife was no trivial matter. It carried implications for the monarchy's image and continuity. The media's fascination with his love life was relentless, turning every potential suitor into a headline. It was during this period that Charles's relationship with Camilla Shand first came to light. The two had met in 1970, and their shared sense of humor and love of the countryside quickly forged a close bond. However, their relationship was complicated by external pressures and timing. Camilla's marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles in 1973 seemed to put an end to their romance, though their connection would later resurface in the most dramatic of ways. As Charles navigated the complexities of his personal life, his public duties continued to expand. His travels during this period were extensive, representing the Queen across the Commonwealth and strengthening diplomatic ties with nations around the world. These tours were as much about reinforcing the monarchy's relevance as they were about Charles honing his skills as a future king. He met world leaders, engaged with diverse cultures, and experienced firsthand the challenges of representing an institution steeped in tradition while adapting to modernity. By the end of the decade, Charles was a man at a crossroads. His naval career had concluded, leaving him free to dedicate himself fully to his royal duties. The expectations surrounding his personal life had only grown, with increasing pressure to settle down and start a family. Meanwhile, his public image was evolving, a mix of admiration for his dedication and scrutiny for his reserved demeanor. The stage was set for one of the most defining chapters of his life, his marriage to Lady Diana Spencer. As the 1980s approached, the world watched closely, eager to see how this young prince would navigate the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Little did anyone know that his journey into marriage, family life, and eventual separation would not only shape his legacy, but also redefine the monarchy itself. By the dawn of the 1980s, Prince Charles had emerged as one of the most recognized figures in the world. His image as the quintessential bachelor, combined with his royal duties and love for the outdoors, had made him a media darling. Yet beneath the public persona, Charles carried the immense pressure of finding a wife, a future queen who would not only compliment him, but also uphold the expectations of the monarchy. Enter Lady Diana Spencer, a young woman from an aristocratic family who seemed to fit the mold of a perfect royal bride. When Charles proposed to her in February 1981, the engagement captured the world's imagination. Diana, only 19 at the time, appeared to be the ideal match for the Prince of Wales, elegant, photogenic, and deeply admired by the public. Their courtship was brief, but their wedding was nothing short of spectacular. On July 29, 1981, an estimated 750 million people worldwide tuned in to watch the fairy tale ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral. However, behind the grandeur of the occasion lay the seeds of a tumultuous marriage. The age difference between Charles and Diana, he was 32, she was 20, was significant. But even more striking was their lack of shared interests and understanding. Charles, introspective and drawn to intellectual pursuits, found it difficult to connect with Diana's youthful vivacity and emotional needs. Diana, in turn, struggled with the overwhelming pressures of royal life and the public scrutiny that came with being the people's princess. Their relationship was further complicated by the shadow of Camilla Parker Bowles. Though Charles had married Diana, his bond with Camilla remained a lingering presence in his life, a fact that would later come to light in ways that shocked the world. Diana, aware of this connection, often referred to their marriage as having three people in it, a phrase that would become emblematic of their troubled union. Despite their personal challenges, Charles and Diana became a dynamic public team in the early years of their marriage. Their royal tours were met with overwhelming enthusiasm, particularly their 1983 trip to Australia and New Zealand, where Diana's charisma stole the show. Crowds flocked to see her, and she was hailed as a global icon. Yet this adoration only added to the strain between the couple. Charles, who had spent years cultivating his image as the face of the monarchy, now found himself eclipsed by his wife's star power. By the late 1980s, the cracks in their marriage had become impossible to ignore. Reports of their strained relationship began to surface in the media, and rumors of infidelity on both sides further fueled public fascination. Charles, deeply unhappy, sought solace in his long-standing friendship with Camilla, while Diana struggled with feelings of isolation and despair. The public, initially enchanted by their fairy tale romance, now found itself engrossed in the drama of their unraveling relationship. In 1992, the couple officially separated, a move that marked the beginning of one of the monarchy's most challenging periods in modern history. That same year, the publication of Andrew Morton's book, Diana, her true story painted a harrowing picture of Diana's struggles within the royal family. The revelations about her battles with bulimia, her mental health, and the breakdown of her marriage captivated and polarized the world. As the 1990s unfolded, the tensions between Charles and Diana reached new heights. In a series of candid interviews, both aired their grievances publicly, further eroding the monarchy's carefully curated image. Charles admitted to his affair with Camilla in a 1994 television interview, while Diana's 1995 interview with Martin Bashir became one of the most explosive moments in royal history. Her vulnerability and honesty endeared her to millions, but also highlighted the deep fractures within the royal institution. The couple's divorce in 1996 was inevitable, bringing an official end to their 15-year marriage. For Charles, the aftermath was a period of reflection and rebuilding. Public opinion had turned against him, with many blaming him for the failure of the marriage and Diana's unhappiness. Yet even in the face of criticism, Charles continued to fulfill his royal duties, working tirelessly on initiatives related to the environment, architecture, and social causes. Tragically, just a year after their divorce, Diana's untimely death in a car accident in Paris sent shockwaves across the globe. The outpouring of grief was unprecedented, with millions mourning the loss of a woman they saw as a beacon of compassion and resilience. For Charles, the tragedy was both personal and public. As the father of Diana's two sons, Princes William and Harry, he faced the immense task of guiding them through their grief while contending with the public's lingering resentment toward him. Diana's death marked a turning point for Charles. It forced him to confront not only his role in the eyes of the public, but also his relationship with his sons. Determined to support them, Charles became more involved in their lives, balancing his duties as a father with his obligations as the Prince of Wales. The bond he nurtured with William and Harry during this period would later prove crucial as they grew into their own royal roles. By the end of the 1990s, Charles had weathered a decade of extraordinary challenges. His marriage, once celebrated as a symbol of hope, had become a cautionary tale of love, duty, and the pressures of royal life. Yet amid the turmoil, Charles had begun to redefine himself, not as the prince trapped by tradition, but as a man navigating the complexities of modernity. The years ahead would see him embrace his passions, reconnect with his personal life, and take steps to restore his public image. As the new millennium approached, Charles stood at a crossroads once again. The lessons of the past had reshaped his perspective, and the path forward held the promise of redemption and renewal. But the question remained: could the prince who had faced so much scrutiny and heartbreak find a way to reconcile his personal truth with the weight of the crown? As the dust of the tumultuous 1990s settled, Prince Charles entered the new millennium with a quiet resolve to rebuild his life and reputation. The shadow of Diana's legacy loomed large, her memory cherished by millions. For Charles, it was a constant reminder of the challenges he faced, not just as a father raising two sons under the weight of public scrutiny, but also as a future king striving to modernize the monarchy. One of the most significant aspects of this rebuilding process was Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. Long vilified in the media as the third party in his marriage to Diana, Camilla's presence in Charles's life was a point of contention for many. However, as time passed, public sentiment began to soften. Through a carefully orchestrated series of public appearances, the couple gradually reintroduced their relationship to the world. By 2005, the effort culminated in their marriage, a moment that marked both a personal victory for Charles and a step forward for the monarchy. The wedding, held at Windsor Guildhall, was a relatively low-key affair compared to the grandeur of Charles's first marriage. Yet, it was deeply significant. For the first time, the monarchy publicly embraced a union rooted in personal choice rather than purely traditional expectations. Camilla, now the Duchess of Cornwall, took on her royal role with grace, supporting Charles in his endeavors while carving out her own identity within the royal family. While his personal life found stability, Charles' public work took on a renewed focus. By the early 2000s, he had already established himself as a passionate advocate for causes often ahead of their time. Environmentalism, in particular, became a defining feature of his public image. Charles had been speaking out about climate change, sustainable agriculture, and conservation long before these issues entered mainstream discourse. His views, initially dismissed by some as eccentric, began to resonate as global awareness of environmental challenges grew. In 1990, Charles founded Dutchy Organics, a brand dedicated to promoting organic farming and sustainable food production. What began as a niche endeavor blossomed into a major enterprise, with profits going to the Prince's Trust and other charitable causes. His commitment to sustainability extended beyond agriculture. He was also a vocal proponent of eco-friendly urban planning and architecture, often championing designs that harmonized with the natural environment. Perhaps one of his most unusual but symbolic efforts in sustainability was his decision to convert his beloved Aston Martin to run on bioethanol derived from surplus wine and whey. The quirky detail earned Charles both admiration and a bit of amusement from the public, but it underscored his dedication to practicing what he preached. For Charles, environmental advocacy wasn't just a professional cause, it was a personal mission. Charles also took steps to modernize the monarchy's engagement with the public. Through initiatives like the Prince's Trust, he supported young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, helping them build careers and confidence. Established in 1976, the Trust had grown into one of the UK's most impactful charities by the 2000s, empowering hundreds of thousands of young people. This focus on youth not only highlighted Charles's forward-thinking approach, but also endeared him to a generation far removed from the traditional image of royalty. As a father, Charles worked to strike a balance between royal duties and his relationship with Princes William and Harry. Following Diana's death, he had faced criticism for his perceived emotional distance, but in the years that followed, he demonstrated a more hands-on approach to parenting. He supported his sons as they pursued their own paths within the royal family, often stepping back to allow them to take the spotlight. For Charles, this was a reflection of his belief in a monarchy that could adapt to modern times while preserving its core traditions. The relationship between Charles and his sons wasn't without its challenges, particularly as Harry's personal choices and eventual departure from royal life brought new controversies to the family. However, Charles maintained a steady, if understated, presence, emphasizing the importance of unity and continuity within the institution. His role as both a father and a future king required a delicate balancing act, one he navigated with growing confidence as the years went on. The 2010s brought new opportunities for Charles to refine his public role. As Queen Elizabeth began delegating more responsibilities to him, Charles stepped further into the spotlight as the de facto head of the monarchy. His attendance at international summits, state visits, and high-profile engagements reflected his growing influence. Yet, even as his responsibilities increased, Charles remained committed to the causes closest to his heart. His efforts extended beyond environmentalism and youth empowerment to include interfaith dialogue and cultural preservation. Charles often spoke about the need to foster understanding between different communities, advocating for tolerance and respect in an increasingly polarized world. His speeches and actions demonstrated a monarch in waiting who understood the complexities of modern society and the need for the monarchy to play a meaningful role within it. By the end of the decade, Charles had largely succeeded in redefining his image. The boy once described as shy and reserved had grown into a confident leader, unafraid to champion causes that mattered to him, even when they defied convention. His marriage to Camilla had proven to be a source of stability and support, allowing him to focus on his duties with renewed vigor. And though the public's memory of Diana remained strong, Charles had carved out a legacy of his own, one rooted in resilience, advocacy, and a commitment to the future. As the monarchy prepared to transition into a new era, the question of what kind of King Charles would be loomed ever larger. The next chapter of his life promised both challenges and opportunities, as he stood on the cusp of fulfilling the role he had been preparing for his entire life. As Prince Charles entered the 2020s, his lifelong preparation for the role of king seemed to approach its inevitable culmination. The transition was not immediate, as Queen Elizabeth II continued her steadfast reign, but her advancing age and occasional health concerns had begun to shift more responsibilities to her eldest son. For Charles, it was a period of quiet anticipation and careful planning, balancing the respect due to his mother's extraordinary legacy with the need to ensure his own vision for the monarchy was ready when the time came. One of the defining challenges of Charles's role as heir apparent in the modern age was navigating the monarchy's place in a rapidly changing society. The United Kingdom, and indeed the world, had evolved dramatically since his birth in 1948. The monarchy, an institution steeped in centuries of tradition, had faced calls for reform, and Charles recognized the need to adapt while maintaining its historical essence. His environmental advocacy, which had once been dismissed as eccentric, became increasingly central to his public image. With climate change now a global priority, Charles's decades-long commitment to sustainability gained newfound relevance. He delivered speeches at international summits like COP26, urging world leaders to take decisive action. His projects, such as sustainable urban planning initiatives and organic farming enterprises, were held up as examples of practical solutions to environmental challenges. For many, Charles represented a bridge between the monarchy's traditional role and its potential as a force for progressive change. Another key aspect of Charles's evolving legacy was his emphasis on intergenerational collaboration. As his sons, Princes William and Harry, came into their own, Charles supported their initiatives while maintaining his own distinct voice. William, with his focus on mental health and environmental conservation, reflected many of his father's values. Harry, though stepping away from royal duties, continued charitable work that echoed Charles's influence. Despite well-publicized tensions within the family, Charles maintained a public posture of unity, aware that the monarchy's strength lay in its ability to present a cohesive front. As the longest-serving heir apparent in British history, Charles also understood the importance of continuity. The monarchy had weathered challenges before, from political upheavals to public scrutiny, and Charles was determined to uphold its resilience. He worked closely with his mother in her later years, ensuring a seamless transfer of duties when necessary. Public appearances, state visits, and high-profile engagements increasingly featured Charles and Camilla, symbolizing the gradual transition of leadership within the royal family. His marriage to Camilla, once a contentious issue, had become a source of quiet strength for Charles. Over time, Camilla earned the public's respect for her steadfast support of Charles and her commitment to charitable work. Together, they presented an image of stability and partnership, qualities that would be essential as they prepared to assume the roles of king and queen consort. Yet, even as Charles approached kingship, questions linger about the kind of monarch he would be. His tenure as Prince of Wales had been marked by his willingness to voice opinions on matters ranging from architecture to agriculture, a stark contrast to the political neutrality traditionally associated with the crown. Critics wondered whether Charles could temper his outspoken nature when he ascended the throne, while supporters argued that his passion and authenticity were precisely what the monarchy needed in the modern era. Charles himself seemed acutely aware of these concerns. In interviews, he often spoke of the need to balance personal convictions with the responsibilities of the crown. He acknowledged that the role of a king required a different approach, one of impartiality and representation rather than activism. It was a delicate line to walk, but Charles had spent a lifetime preparing for it, learning from both his successes and his missteps. As the monarchy looked toward the future, Charles's vision for its role in society became clearer. He championed the idea of a slimmed-down royal family, focused on core members who could effectively represent the institution. This approach, while pragmatic, reflected the shifting expectations of the public, who increasingly demanded transparency and efficiency from their leaders. For Charles, it was a way to ensure the monarchy remained relevant in an era of rapid change. His philanthropic efforts also took on a broader scope. Through the Prince's Trust and other initiatives, Charles sought to address issues such as youth unemployment, mental health, and social inequality. These causes, while not traditionally associated with royal duties, highlighted his commitment to using his platform for the greater good. They also reinforced the monarchy's role as a unifying force in times of uncertainty, providing a sense of stability and continuity amid societal challenges. By the time Charles stood on the brink of kingship, his legacy was already firmly established. He had navigated personal trials, public scrutiny, and the weight of tradition to emerge as a figure of resilience and vision. His journey was far from perfect, marked by moments of controversy and criticism, but it was undeniably human. In many ways, it was this humanity that defined Charles's appeal. He was not an untouchable figure of royal idealism, but a man who had lived, learned, and grown in the public eye. As the next chapter of his life unfolded, Charles faced the ultimate test of his preparation. The crown he had waited decades to wear symbolized more than power or privilege. It was a testament to endurance, evolution, and the enduring relevance of the monarchy itself. What kind of king Charles would remain to be seen, but one thing was certain. His reign would reflect a lifetime of lessons, a deep commitment to service, and an unwavering belief in the institution he would soon lead. For Charles, the truth about his life lay not in the grandeur of his titles or the controversies of his past, but in his ability to adapt, to lead, and to inspire. As the curtain rose on this new era, the world watched closely, ready to see how the boy born into destiny would rise to fulfill it. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.